Welcome to Normal Island Live. I'm Lewis Aaron and I'm joined by writer and political commentator Andy Twelves. Hello, Andy. How's it going?
Good evening. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. I am having some battery issues with my camera today, so there could be some tech issues to come. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But yeah, thanks for joining us. We are also going to be joined by Curtis Daly later on, and we will have an interview with immigration expert Zoe Gardner, friend of the show, and make sure that you don't miss it. Now, coming up on tonight's show, your party conference, and what is going on? Immigration numbers are plummeting, but people are disputing them. And is a reform and Tory pact happening? Well, we'll find out. So you can also help us as well by, sorry, I'm going to start that one again. Something popped up on my screen. You can help us grow by also visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. It's really important to help us out. We are a small group of people trying to make this into something bigger and even better with your help. So we really would love your support. You can support us by funding our work or becoming a YouTube member. So please consider it. I really want to see a lot of comments in the comments section today. I'm really looking forward to that. It's my favorite part of the show. So please, 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 lots of comments, lots of questions, and we will see you in the comment section shortly. Now, for the first story, everybody's been talking about it. Everyone's got an opinion on this, but this last weekend, we saw the now infamous conference for your party. It was highly anticipated, the event, and it included lots of drama, rigorous debate, and the party's name.
I was going to read it in reverse order, but I've now got the piece of paper in front of me here. Your party is the name of your party.
Wow. It was quite the moment. Your party, our party, Popular Alliance, and For the Many. These were the options that were available, and the name stuck. I guess the name stuck. That came at the end of conference in Jeremy Corbyn's closing speech, but what transpired across the weekend, there were a lot of headlines, weren't they? Before conference even began, expulsions of members had already been happening. So some members of the SWP, which is the Socialist Workers' Party, including Lewis Neilson, the party's national secretary, found out the night before. Now, Neilson explained what happened during our live stream at Zara Sultana's eve of the conference rally.
And while I'm on the question of democracy, today, myself and some of my comrades received a letter, an email, saying that we were expelled from your party. Must be a record to be expelled from an organisation which hasn't been fully formed before the conference has even started. And we expelled because I'm a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. And I have a confession to make. There is a group in your party that is trying to take it over, that has an agenda, that is undemocratic, and it's the clique of the people running it at the top. They're the people who are ruining your party.
Oh, so much political drama. Now, other members, including Lancashire councillor Michael Lavalette, was barred from entering the conference at the orders of close Corbyn aide Carrie Murphy.
Last week there was a message went out to any councillor, any elected official who is a youth party member who hadn't been sortitioned, that they could get a visitor's pass. So I applied and I turned up this morning to get my visitor's pass. Other councils got in under that criteria, but Carrie Murphy came to me and told me that I was banned from conference.
Did she come to you personally?
She did.
Okay. And what was the rationale for banning you from conference?
She said that she would meet me later for a coffee and provide me with evidence which showed that I was going to disrupt conference, which will be interesting because I have no intention of disrupting conference and I don't know what evidence she's going to give, but she says she has evidence that myself and Counterfire are going to disrupt conference, which is not true.
And just to clarify that, Michael, she came and found you personally to tell you that you were banned?
Yeah, I spoke to a couple of people I knew and said, where's my ticket? And they went to get it, and then Kerry came and spoke to me and told me I was banned.
It's quite interesting. Such a new party dealing with what is very like cliche political conference drama. This is not the first time this has happened. I think this type of thing has happened at literally every major political conference that I've ever, watched every time they're on TV every single year. But later, Michael was allowed in and actually received an apology. Councillor James Giles, an ally of Zara Sultana, was also barred entry too, despite having a visitor's pass.
You'll be in the building voting on motions and getting involved today, are you?
I'm afraid not. I got told this morning that I would not be allowed into the conference hall. Now, unlike yesterday's purge of the SWP, I've not been expelled from the party, so I'm still a member. So I will be voting from the comfort of my phone on various motions, but I've been told I'm not allowed in. The reasons that have been given are apparently there is, and I quote, a private matter being investigated by the Information Commissioner's Office. Now, this is news to me. It's so private that not even I know what's being investigated, and I've never heard from the Information Commissioner's Office about any matter, your party or not, in my life. So I can only say it's a stitch up, and I'm sorry to say also, Callum, that I'm not the only one. Michael Lavalette, a councillor in Preston, also meant to have a councillor's visitor pass, been told this morning he's not allowed in because there had been evidence that he was going to disrupt conference. But of course, when asked for that evidence, none was forthcoming.
Obviously, there's been a sortition process to get passes for people to come into conference and take part. I suppose you weren't picked for that sortition. Some would argue that you're not in conference because you weren't selected, and that's democracy.
Sure, but there's a number of people here who are on what's called a councillor's visitor pass. So they don't have speaking rights, but they're able to be in the hall by virtue of the fact they hold public office.
Who, if anyone, informed you that you wouldn't be allowed in today? Is it just a general your party email you've received? Was it a specific person? Have you been how did you find out, and who's making those decisions?
Well, look, it was a written message, and it came from a volunteer who's here trying to steward today. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't want to name that person on the basis that, in effect, they're only the messenger. So I don't think it would be fair to accuse them of being the block. I'm going to be quite upfront about these things. I don't beat around the bush. Carrie Murphy is responsible, in my view, for the expulsion of a wide number of comrades from across this movement.
Now, these expulsions prompted Zara Sultana to stage a boycott of the first day of the conference. I remember seeing the headline of this when it happened, and I was just kind of like again, more drama. It just, it was making me cringe a little bit almost. It's kind of sad at the same time, but we'll get into that shortly. Now, meeting the media outside the ACC, condemning the actions, that's when she was enjoying her boycott, posting on social media too, and it got quite a lot of coverage.
Would you like those who have been expelled to be reinstated?
Absolutely. They shouldn't have been expelled in the first place. These are groups that don't even run in elections, and if we are here to be the home of the left, a home for all socialists, this is not how you treat members. This is what the Labour Party did, where people were expelled, members were treated just like volunteers, not allowed to actually make decisions and just thrown on the scrap heap. We're here to treat people with respect and end a toxic culture that is ridden with leaks to the press, smears, allegations and sabotage, including what happened to me before I went on BBC Question Time.
Now, the following day, Zara Sultana appeared at conference for her speech, but one of the members accompanying her was Councillor James Giles, who managed to get inside the conference despite not being allowed.
Well, I haven't got a pass. I'm here, I came in with Zara's permission, of course, and I intend to stay here and watch Zara's speech and watch proceedings until such time as the top-down clique, I'd say on balance, more likely than not, kicks me out.
Are you causing trouble?
No.
Are you planning on causing trouble?
No.
Or would it be a fair assessment to say that by being here when you know you shouldn't be, that you're causing trouble, or do you think you have a right to actually be in the hall today?
No. I was told I would have a pass. It was revoked yesterday morning on false grounds, factional grounds. I have the right to be here. I'm the leader of the opposition of a London Borough Council. I'm a Your Party member. I'm still a Your Party member. And I'm delighted with the votes that have taken place overnight. Maximum member democracy is here. It's alive. The party's alive and kicking. And the members will win.
So much drama, but putting the drama aside, like what outcomes came from the actual weekend? So the two main votes that took place were dual membership and collective leadership. The membership were voted in favor of a collective leadership model instead of one single leader. Very Switzerland of them. Jeremy Corbyn supported a single leader, while Zara Sultana wanted collective leadership. Now, dual membership is now allowed, but this doesn't begin until February. Anyone who is a member of another party can not join your party currently. So these are the results that were in for the votes. Now, as you can see, dual membership passed by a wide margin of 68.2% to 30.8%. The leadership vote was lost a lot closer, almost at a knife edge, with 48.4% wanting a single leader, but 51.6% voted for collective leadership. Very interesting. Now, yeah, the questions around the expulsions weren't really answered. There seems to be no consistency on what grounds you can be kicked out of. The SWP are not registered with the Electoral Commission, which was supposedly a condition. DSYP have published this WhatsApp exchange between @John W. Rees and Jeremy Corbyn. So Rees seeking clarification, i.e. the ban on other parties, Corbyn offering reassurance that he assumes it only refers to those registered with the Electoral Commission. So still kind of like, again, more drama up in the air. And I'm sure this will potentially continue. It doesn't seem to be kind of stopping, but we will talk even more about it soon. But interestingly, Jeremy Corbyn is a member of the Islington Community Independent Group, which is registered by the Electoral Commission. So clearly there's no consistency on this. So let's talk about what collective leadership is. Like, what does it actually mean? So they've said the party shall be collectively led by ordinary members elected to the Central Executive Committee, with the chair, vice chair, and spokesperson in particular serving as the public political leadership. In the party's second year, the CEC shall commence a review into different options for the future leadership models, including the possibility of co-leader and deputy leader models, as well as relations between national leaders. So this review shall produce recommendations and a range of leadership structure options. All sounds very fun and bureaucratic, doesn't it? To allow for continuity of leadership. This review shall be put into a democratic vote of all members under one member, one vote in advance of elections to be held before the National Conference in late 2027. Now, with the changes then incorporated into their constitution. So ordinary members will occupy 16 spaces on the CEC. The CEC will elect a chair, vice chair, and spokesperson of the party. So despite the collective model, the party will still have a public-facing leadership. So when it came to the numbers, turnout wasn't particularly high. Out of the 55,000 members, only 9,000 voted on the dual membership and collective leadership motions. However, it is understood that members didn't receive an email to vote until 8 p.m. Saturday night, despite voting officially opening at 5 p.m. So it's likely turnout would have been higher if the members had more time. Joining me now is Curtis Daly, who was there at the conference and will be joined by Andy again soon. Curtis, I kind of don't know where to start. I don't want to avoid party structure because I feel like we always go for the drama, but we will come to it. But we will start with the drama first. You were on the ground. What were the just general vibes over the weekend?
I first want to say, by the way, congrats to us for Friday. We put on a live show for Zara's Eva conference, right? And we've never done a live event before. It was me and Callum. Again, we are volunteers, and I think we smashed out the park. It's very exciting to be at a conference. We've never been there before. What was it like on the ground? I can tell you, do not get your entire opinion based on social media. Just don't, right? You're going to get tidbits of information, but...
Social media is not real? What?
I know.
Breaking news.
It's only really speaking to people, right? It's forming opinions based on that and having conversations, and you can get the real picture. I think my first impressions was it was very well put together. It actually was. I mean, you're not going to get this in the media on the outside because obviously people are going to rely on headlines, but it's very well put together. I thought it was incredible production values. I think the left for a long, long time has had very low budgets and it doesn't look good. And you look at Reform Conference and it does look beautiful. Obviously Andrea Jenkins singing on stage kind of cheapens it a little bit. But when
it's a bit tacky, but it's still like well done, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. But when it comes to production values, it was very good. Huge stage, massive TV. You had smoke machines behind it. It looked fantastic. Obviously, we have to talk about the drama. Let's talk about the drama. I think the first thing is there were expulsions before conference happened. I mean, it's almost unprecedented. It was actually at Zara Sultana's Eve rally, Eve of Conference rally, where we first heard people being expelled. Lewis Nielsen of the SWP explained that literally on his way here, he found out he was expelled. I mean, this is crazy stuff, right? A party hasn't been formed. Now, of course, speaking to Jeremy, and his answer was there were membership rules that said you cannot be a member of another political party. But unfortunately, when it comes to whoever behind the scenes aren't really good on detail, or there's a miscommunication on detail, because some will say, well, if you're standing against us or you plan to stand against us, you can't be a member of the party, which is fair enough. Other people said, if you're a national party and you're registered with the Electoral Commission, you can't be a member of your party. But as you've pointed out in your piece, Jeremy Corbyn is a member of the independent community or independent alliance community, whatever it's called, right? That's a member of the Electoral Commission. Would Jeremy Corbyn bar himself? No, he wouldn't. So when it comes to the drama side, though, it was actually quite far in between, if you actually can believe it. The majority of the conference, I thought it was well organised, well put together. There was a Telegraph journalist there who I didn't see in real life, but I saw them put out a tweet and said, "Oh, it's low ambiance, it's low energy, it's very sad." Me and many people from Politics Joe were like, we retweeted her and said, "This is rubbish. We were there." It was certainly exciting, I think. I think my opinion of your party has changed a little bit after conference. I was definitely more pessimistic going into it. But during the conference, democracy is messy. There'll be opportunists who will clip out, bits of where the motion debates are happening. And yes, it's a bit chaotic, but that happens in every political party. Now, this isn't me downplaying the chaos, by the way, because Zara Sultana that same day staged a boycott. And we were told, like people in the media, but also activists were literally given a message in WhatsApp, like, come outside, Zara Sultana is going to be here and she's going to make some sort of statement. And the statement was basically, she was standing in solidarity with those that were barred from conference and those that were expelled from conference. And she was calling for sort of, maximum democracy or maximum democratic structures. That's what she was calling for. And of course, that made the headlines, and we can discuss whether that was a good or bad idea or not. But really, after that, it sort of quietened down again, and it got back to the actual politics of it. So really, the headlines do outweigh the positives in the party. I was just speaking backstage about how the formation of the Labour Party 100 years ago, there would have been absolute bust-ups. There probably were punch-ups behind the scenes. But in the era of what we live in now, new media, social media, everything is on video. And I think things look more chaotic than it actually is. That is generally just democracy. Now, there are questions that still aren't answered when it comes to the bitter faction infighting. It is largely Team Jeremy and Team Zara. That's kind of a bitter infaction there.
It seems like to me that the impression that I get, and this is just purely my impression, is that the people who are clued up on everything that's kind of going on, not for knowing anything that anybody else doesn't know, but if people who watch the story closely, I do see a lot of people, I hate to say take sides, but taking Zara's side in the sense of she seems to be fighting against what is a political established machine underneath kind of like Jeremy Corbyn, not even necessarily, and this is again what a lot of people do say, not even necessarily just like led by him, like he is the, person who's conducting all of this, but just like the team around him, are the people who are causing a lot of these issues. And the way I see it through that lens is that when Zara's kind of doing these public things and fighting back, is that Jeremy and Jeremy's team have this like network, they have this establishment, they have power, right? They can do things, and her only power is through her very loud voice, which she can wield and get attention to. She doesn't do the whole political maneuverings in the background, it seems. It seems like she likes to do everything publicly because that's where her power lies. And I see her getting the blame from people who don't necessarily know what's going on, who are only looking at this quite shallowly as a person who's causing drama. But even putting all that aside, but putting it all together at the same time, is this even viable? And again, I'm not even trying to say this to stir the pot, but if you've got the two faces of the party. The party is nothing without Corbyn and nothing without Zoltara. These came together as a package, right? Zara brought in a lot of people who aren't necessarily engaged with Corbyn, but obviously knows who he is and knows generally what he stands for. And Corbyn brought in a lot of like the people who've supported him for a while. This was the machine. How is it that they can have all these fights between money? You've got MPs leaving. You've got people getting kicked out of conference. You've got fights about the power structure. You know, she had the quote about was it the boys club? I think she specifically used. Is this even viable going forward?
I mean, the thing is though, 55,000 people have joined a socialist party. That hasn't happened since the 1940s. I think it is viable. Now, I mean, I suppose it's a complicated question, though. Are you saying, are they viable to win an election? No. But then I don't think the Green Party are going to win the next election. I think everybody knows that. But the point of your party isn't just electoral vehicle. Some activists within it, I mean, especially the Democratic Socialists of your party, a faction that want maximum democracy, say that it needs to be organisational vehicle too. There's also a third element, and that's building stories and narratives. Look, you know, would the Labour Party be speaking about legal migration and indefinite leave to remain without Nigel Farage? No, they wouldn't. So I think it's really important that there's not just a left, but a radical left voice that's trying to pull the Overton window back, right? It's not just talking about inequality, poverty, wealth taxes, but there are voices inside your party that are talking about, I mean, Zara Sultana clumsily said nationalize the entire economy. I'm glad she slightly walked that back and said, I don't mean nationalize everything. What I mean is nationalizing the commanding heights of the economy, such as public services. But for the rest of it, we're talking about sort of worker co-ops, right? That's socialism, right? It's the means of production in the hands of the workers. That's not going to work in terms of a manifesto commitment. I mean, you couldn't do that in one parliament. Arguably, you couldn't do it in our political system. You couldn't win on it, by the way. People wouldn't vote for that. But I think it's really important to maybe put these kind of ideas on the agenda. So I think it's a multi-pronged thing. I think it's viable because there are nearly 60,000 people who have joined up a new political party. Think of the Democratic Socialists of America. There's 30,000. You see the success of Zohran Mamdani, right? But he's part of an organization that has been around for decades and they only have 30k members. And that's America, bigger population. Yet your party, in a matter of 6 months, have 55,000 members. Now, of course, if it wasn't for the bitter infighting and all the shit that went on, they'd be a lot more. I mean, nearly 100,000. It is an important point of voice in politics. But again, can they win seats? They can win a couple. But I think it still needs to find its identity. There are many external forces who say, look, is your party a class-based political party? Or is it home for lots of radical different ideas? Some might even dare say, oh, is it just a woke party? I mean, we'll probably ignore those people. But we don't know what it is at the moment. What doesn't make any sense to me is, because I think over the last couple of weeks, and especially over conference, there's a lot of people who call themselves socialists and communists have kind of outed themselves as just social democrats. Now, I don't have an issue with social democrats, by the way. They can be based, some of them. But I think if you're a socialist, be a socialist. And what I mean by that is, there are people who are saying, yes, I want your party to be a socialist party because we want to take on the oligarchs, great. We want to reduce inequality. But when you say stuff like, okay, let's put workers in charge of businesses, people then balk at that. I'm like, but that is literally socialism. It doesn't make sense to have two social democratic parties. You've got the Greens, which is a social democratic party, saying the right things, talking about inequality, talking about public ownership, talking about wealth taxes, right? Does it make sense to have another political party that is offering the exact same thing? I don't know. Maybe it's better to have the Greens leading on social democracy where it's more electable and your party that sort of underpins the left with more radical politics. It's a strange dichotomy, though, because, again, I don't think it's electable to say, vote for me, we're going to put the production in the hands of the workers. No one wants that. People just want solutions to their very real everyday problems right now rather than big sort of grand ideas.
I think they just need to find a better way to sell it. And I feel like they need to take a page out of some other people's books. I really like how Grace Blakely sells socialism, the way she described it, because she doesn't just like go socialism. Like she talks about it, she gives it meaning, she personifies it in a way. But I want to come on to Andy. I don't want to leave him waiting too long. So thank you so much for joining us, Curtis.
Thank you.
Now, We'll bring Andy in just one second, but I'll be interested to see in the comments from, I know people who watch the show who were initially excited about, Jeremy and Zara and the rise of your party. And then obviously the drama ensued. The drama continues ensuing. But now that they've had their conference, they've cemented some structures into place. How is everybody in the comments kind of like feeling about the idea of your party? Or are people looking elsewhere? Or are people just still disenfranchised from any specific person or party? Now, Andy, you were on the outside. How was it looking in? You've just heard about what Curtis was saying, like he was on the ground. But from your perspective as a newsreader, being on social media, hearing what other people are saying, how did it look from your perspective?
I think the first thing that struck me wasn't actually about the conference. It was about the coverage of the conference. It was actually really nice to see a lot of those kind of independent outlets like Turn Left, like Novara, some of those other kind of big people on social media. I think even the New Statesman did absolutely amazing coverage of what a lot of the lobby and the political correspondent class just wouldn't cover. I thought that was really, really, really nice and positive to see that kind of coverage at a national scale. When I was looking at kind of hearing this, reading the report, seeing it on social media, it kind of struck me that the conference really did have energy. Clearly, those activists were really keen to reorganize, to kind of get ready for next year's local elections and the election in 2029. But it had that kind of organizational chaos almost that makes people a bit nervous. Working class people who aren't that tuned into politics want a party that is able to run a conference as well as running a country. And I think looking at just some of the simple mistakes that they made, like the exclusion stuff. I mean, how can you expel someone from something that doesn't actually exist yet, if that makes sense? And I'm all for the kind of democratic, transparent processes, but they've got to be applied across the band. You can't be having people have their visitor passes taken away, but then reinstated, but then they don't have speaking rights because of some technicality in a rule book that hasn't really been written. And it just kind of, I'm a Labour Party affiliated member through my trade union, so I've got no kind of skin in the game of the Your Party gossip. But I want an organised, united left, and it did make me a bit sad to see all this energy kind of being spent on inward-facing stuff when really we should be organising about that far-right threat that is, almost here. I think that's what I'd rather see us spending our time on rather than, Kerry Murphy expelling people and then giving their passes back and going for coffee or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
It seems quite amateur, doesn't it? Because if you're going to kick somebody out of a party, that's going to kick somebody out of a conference, that's probably going to cause drama. The headline of someone getting kicked out is worse than somebody actually disrupting it, right? If they were going to get up during, I don't know, Corbyn's speech or something and wave a banner or shout something, that's probably not really going to get the mainstream media's attention, rather than like, oh, here's a bit of more political drama. That's going to get headlines, right? So it just seems almost amateur from Kerry Murphy's point of view. But maybe that's what she wants. Maybe she wants people to, make Zara look bad. But that's only complete speculation from me.
Well, I think,
go ahead, sorry.
Maybe just on that point, I think it is kind of almost too close to what we saw in 2020, 2021, 2022 in the Labour Party, that culture of expulsions. And I think it's quite sad that appears to have somehow gone the other way and is being applied to the Your Party leadership. I think a lot of the kind of lay members and activists will be really quite scared because there's a reason they left the Labour Party because of that expulsion culture. And I don't think they'll want that in their new kind of socialist movement.
And I actually want to pick up your point about like independent media, right? Because obviously we're not just biased because we're Turn Left, but when we're talking about actual people who do proper full-on reporting consistently throughout, like we do events, right? We're involved in things, but when you've got like the New Statesman, as you said, you gave them credit. We need to obviously be supporting these outlets a little bit more. And it's not like, the New Statesman's not biased towards your party in any way. We know that, people who work there have been very critical of Corbyn over the years. Sometimes people would say unfairly so. So obviously the key to maybe the future of better parties and better democracy is actually supporting independent media further. And this is not a plug or anything. I do think it's important. I remember seeing on social media, on TikTok specifically, a clip from Sky News where they got all these leaflets and it was like, oh, here's the Communist Party of Britain, here's the Socialist Party of here, look at all these leaflets here, here, here. And it was almost trying to, again, like paint it as this completely, fringe radical thing where all these like crazy communists are there. And obviously there were communists there. But again, it's this idea, this notion of, we're not actually going to cover the substance of the conference, and maybe some of that can be blamed on Corbyn and Zara, but we're just going to try and paint it as like loony lefties infighting again, right?
Yeah, I think, obviously with the 24-hour news cycle and the way that social media operates, obviously outlets they want to make money because they want to stay solvent, and they want to get this clickbaity kind of rage baity stuff to get people fired up, whether it's people on the left getting angry that the substance isn't getting covered, or people on the right going, oh, these communists, what are they doing? They're going to take over. But I thought I think a great example of kind of reclaiming the narrative is Zach Polanski with the kind of Bold Politics podcast. He's done amazing things in the mainstream media. I say that as a Labour Party member. I have to admire the way, since he became leader and during his leadership campaign, how he really took on the mainstream media and has done things that I would say no other Green leader and not many people on the left have been able to do. But I think that idea of he didn't like the narrative in the mainstream media, so he created his own on Bold Politics. And I think that is absolutely what the left should be doing, not just in the political party space, but in the trade union sector. The CWU has an amazing podcast. And I think these kind of new media outlets is exactly the future of kind of socialist organising.
Even though we criticize the media constantly, and people will say, obviously, up until the leadership of Zach Polanski, people, I listen to the news agents, and Lewis always says he gets, emails and tweets from people saying, why don't you talk about the Greens more? But I've always argued, and it's only partly, it's not completely, that people need to earn the attention. And Zach has done that, right? The media is biased. They'll cover what they'll cover. They'll cover some parties way more and way others. So you've got Ed Davey, jumping off of whatever he's jumping off of this week and trying to be desperate for media. And I feel like Zach Polanski's almost like embarrassed Ed Davey. Like he's been doing all these stunts to try and get attention, be a bit Borisy in a sense. And Zach Polanski's just kind of like, hold my beer and has just done what everybody else almost said was impossible, in the sense of he earned the media attention. So it just proves that the way to get the attention is that you have to earn it. And Zach's kind of done that. And right now, obviously, your party are earning the wrong kind of attention. But it'll be interesting to see kind of where it all goes. Now, I did promise I will talk about the structure very quickly because we do need to move on to the next story. But away from the drama, structure of the party, just general opinions, the idea of like collective leadership might change in the future. They've got a executive committee. It sounds very, almost cliche in a sense, the executive committee. But obviously the new thing is this collective leadership thing. Like any opinions on anything that they voted through and the structure and how they've set it up so far?
I think collective leadership it's like anything, it has its pros and cons. I think at this stage of organising, I don't know if it is that useful to have that many kind of cooks over the pot whilst you're establishing things like your company's house registration, your electoral commission filings, just basic stuff like that, I think can get overcomplicated with it. But I mean, the main thing that I was baffled at is you're running what is effectively a startup party. The whole structures are being built, the whole thing is new. I think it is insane that there is this ban on people holding other party memberships when you're creating a new party. The Labour Party, founded in 1900 was it? That was a collection of smaller independent parties that came together and formed the Labour Representation Committee. If your party want to be, the 21st century version of that, then they're going to have to take people from other parties. I think leaving it as a matter of exclusion, if they're a member of the SWP or if they're a member of the Labour Party or the Greens, or even Corbyn is a member of the Islington
Independent Alliance or something.
Yeah. So I just think it's so silly to have that. That was the big rule that kind of just baffled me, because it's like you just can't. Where are you going to get your people from? Because you want people that are politically engaged already, and you don't want, even if they just haven't cancelled the direct debit, are you going to go after them? Do you know what I mean? It's just silly.
Yeah. I guess the only way to judge it is to see how it all pans out and see where we are in the future now that they've had their first conference. But we will have to move on to story 2. We spent a while on this story, but it was a big one. So on to the most fun topic that the media loves talking about. Let's talk about immigration, because it has dramatically reduced from the Boris wave of 900,000 plummeting to just over 200,000 this year. The Boris wave thing is kind of funny, only because I know that every time he hears that or sees that in the media, I just know he'll be upset. And that brings me a little bit of joy, I'm not going to lie. Net migration has fallen to a pre-pandemic low. Official statistics have shown as successive Tory and Labour governments have looked to tighten controls on visas. Now, the Office for National Statistics, the ONS, has said that net migration dropped to 204,000 in the year ending June 2025, around 2/3 lower than levels a year earlier. Now, the large fall came as fewer non-EU plus nationals arrived for work and study reasons. The ONS has said that there were 898,000 people arriving in the UK and 693,000 leaving the country. It brings net migration down from a previous peak of 944,000 in the year to March 2023. It's very interesting. A lot of people have been arguing about these numbers too, but bizarrely, instead of celebration, Reform's Zia Youssef moaned about emigration. They're never happy. 693,000 people left the UK in the year to June. That is the highest number in a century. When will they ever be happy? When will they ever be happy? I thought Reform would be really, really happy about this, but I've seen this a lot from the right-wing media over the last few weeks. I talked about this just a few days ago about how they're now worried, the wrong type of people, the right type of people are leaving. But when you're, basically shit-talking a country and talking it down for years, eventually it's going to have an effect, isn't it? But what Youssef seems to miss is that it's not emigration, but rather non-EU national visas simply they ran out. Yet Reform now wants to create a new political issue. Young people fleeing the country. They're angry that people are leaving. But where is their consistency? Because earlier this week, our own Curtis Daly spoke to Zoe Gardiner, who has, I think, pretty much been on every single TV show and panel on this topic over the last few years. She's an independent researcher and commentator in the UK on immigration and asylum policy, and they were discussing the fall in immigration. So here's Zoe's thoughts and feelings on it.
What impact do you think this dramatic fall on immigration will make?
It's going to have a really, really big impact, both, I think, politically, but also crucially, and this has been missing from the conversation, I think, economically. The way we're managing immigration in general is very bad for value for money. We run an immigration system that, in the ways that it harms people, actually costs us a lot more than a more humane approach would. So it's bad value for money in the way we run it. But it's also quite worrying for the economy and the labor market that we're seeing such a drastic drop-off in immigration as well. And that's going to impact our communities, our ability to get care work that we need, businesses' ability to get the hospitality workers that they need, all of our ability to, have budgets that don't cut services and raise taxes on ordinary people, because there are less people coming into the economy and therefore go and pay tax. And that impacts the outlook for the deficit and the debt and government borrowing as well. So it's going to have a huge impact. And I think that that's not really been factored into the conversation so far, because the conversation about immigration is so firmly on Nigel Farage's terms. And obviously the Labour government has completely capitulated to Nigel Farage's terms for talking about immigration. So we're talking about immigration in terms of asylum seekers, culture war, and racist smears. And we're not talking about immigration in terms of what our country needs and what would benefit our communities and how we could run an immigration system differently and better.
I mean, do you think there's any possibility of Labour gaining support from, let's say, left behind towns who have immigration as a top priority? Do you think this is going to work in their favour?
I don't think so, no. All the evidence looking both specifically at what's been happening in the UK, since the Labour Party have come to power, every time that they turn around and announce more harsh measures against immigrants, they drop in the polls and Reform does better. So that is already the evidence that we've seen in this country. We've also seen evidence from history and from other countries where supposedly centrist parties imitate far-right parties' policies on immigrations. It doesn't actually benefit the centrist parties, it benefits the far right, because people see those issues validated, they see the salience of those issues go up, and then they vote for the party that they think is going to most effectively crack down on that. And that's never going to be Labour, it's always going to be Reform. So it's not beneficial to them. But I think that there's another side to that that's really important for leftists to understand, which is that some of the things that Labour are doing are not intended, or at least in my analysis, they're not intended to shore up support from reform voters. Actually, they're presented like that. But things like increasing the length of time before lower paid migrant workers can achieve a settled status in the UK. Nobody knows the detail of those policies anyway, right? People don't know whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 15 years before a person can achieve settled status, and they don't know what that means for them economically. So this isn't about chasing votes, right? It won't make any difference to votes because people don't know what the changes are and what the impacts are. They just don't know. So what the impact of that is actually making a more precarious working class, making a group of our society more able to be exploited by their employers for longer. Because if your right to live in the UK is precarious for longer and relies on the goodwill of your employer for longer, then you are at a position of disadvantage vis-a-vis your boss for longer, and that makes you more easily exploited. And there's tons of evidence about how our visa system and this precarious temporary status that we give to migrants leaves them open to extreme forms of exploitation, wage theft, harassment in the workplace, and even on the extreme end, trafficking and slavery. So that's actually what the intention of a lot of this policy is. It's not chasing votes. They know that's not going to work. People don't understand the technical details. This is about creating an ever more exploitable, precarious, lower class group of workers. And that is because they are in hock to the big business interests and the big money interests, just like the Conservatives were before them.
Now, looking at the figures, it was around 900,000, and it's dramatically fallen to around 200,000. Is this sustainable? And if it's kept like this, what would be the impacts economically? But also, would there be tax rises, for example, or would the government have to look at increasing immigration as a result of it?
I think the first thing to be really clear about is that this isn't over. All the forecasts show this dramatic fall in numbers. Part of it was always baked in because a lot of the extremely high numbers that we saw coming under the previous government were all on temporary visas, and those visas are gradually running out. So we're seeing a significant increase in emigration from that cohort, right? So there was always going to be a readjustment after that particular high, but there's also an increase in immigration that wouldn't have been baked in necessarily because people are learning that they've got no viable long-term route to settlement. They've had their right to live with their kids and their spouse in the UK decimated, so more people choosing to leave. And then also a drastic decrease in immigration based on the changes that have been made previously by the previous government and by the first Home Secretary. So now these new changes that were announced the other week by Shabana Mahmood, they're going to impact that even further. Plus, more of those visa holders on temporary visas are going to come to the end of their term over the next couple of years. So what we're looking at is this dramatic drop is not over yet. We're likely to see a continued dramatic drop. And the irony of ironies is that it might be this Labour government that sees us finally get below 100,000 net immigration per year. And when we look at that, every time that net immigration falls by 100,000 a year, the OBR whacks another £7 billion onto the predicted deficit, because that is lost tax revenue, that is lost productivity, that is lost ability of migrants to be creating businesses and employing people, right? Like, the fewer people we have consuming services in our economy means our economy is smaller. So fewer people coming in, especially with our aging population and stagnant birth rate. So our birth rate is the lowest it's ever been, and it has been the lowest it's ever been year on year for 3 years now. That is, over the next decade or so, births are going to match deaths in this country. And at the same time, obviously, people are living to be older. So our population of people over the age of 65, over the age of 85 is ballooning. Those people need and deserve more care more healthcare, more hospital appointments, more time spent at the GP, more time with care homes. And at the same time, we're reducing the only way that we had growth in our younger age population, which was through immigration. We're drastically reducing that. That means fewer workers in all of those key industries, especially hardly impacted the care sector, the health sector. And it also means, less tax revenue to feed our public services as well. So overall, this is going to have a dramatically bad impact. It's going to have a direct impact on what choices the Chancellor has to make at the current budget, the one we just had. It's not been talked about, but the cuts she had to make, the tax rises she had to make in order to balance the books, that has been impacted by the lower net immigration figures. And at the next budget, it will be the same again. So we are all paying the price for the decision to dramatically reduce immigration numbers.
What sort of policies or direction do you think this government should take, in your view? Whether it's indefinite leave to remain, for example. Yeah, what big changes would you like to see?
Well, actually, I have a report that's launching this week where I lay out a 9-point plan for changing the immigration and asylum systems, both to one that's more humane, that treats immigrants like decent people with rights and respects their rights, and that would be focused on better outcomes for our communities and for the host communities for immigrants as well. So that's both on an economic standpoint, but also from a social cohesion standpoint. So it's nine points, so I can just rush through them. The sort of headline things. Obviously, we mainly talk about asylum seekers. Ironically, the only group where there has not been a decrease in arrivals, because they are the ones who are desperate. They are the ones who don't have a choice, right? And every other immigrant has a choice about where they go or whether they come here. And they're choosing not to come. Asylum seekers don't have a choice. And so they continue to come in the exact same numbers as before. So for asylum, obviously the biggest political and moral priority has to be to provide people with a safe alternative way to enter the country so they don't have to risk their lives on small boats. And that would drastically decrease the irregular arrivals, which is what people object to overall. They don't object to the arrival of nurses and care workers and hospitality workers and construction workers. They object to the arrival of small boats. So we could provide a model based on the Ukraine scheme that allowed people to apply online from places in Europe to come to the UK safely and offer that as an alternative to the boat. So that's obviously the sort of headline obvious thing that the government needs to do. The other things with the asylum system is to let asylum seekers work, to fast track claims of people who are obviously refugees, and to run a not-for-profit asylum accommodation system that puts money and new housing into local authority hands, which should be available to everybody who is homeless and in need of emergency accommodation support, not just to silo off asylum seekers in low-quality accommodation that is lining the pockets of rich private companies. So that's asylum. And then when it comes to work, we need to decouple visas from employers. So at the moment, your employer sponsors your visa, and it's very difficult to change job as an immigrant worker in the UK. Obviously, that puts you at a massive disadvantage in terms of bargaining for good conditions and good pay in your workplace. So we need to decouple that and have a system whereby everybody who comes to work in the UK competes on a fair and level playing field in the labour market. And then we need to reform the labour inspection system, because at the moment there are huge gaps. And unfortunately, in Labour's Employment Rights Bill, aside from the other ways in which it's been watered down, it's just got a huge blind spot where it fails to protect migrant workers in terms of labour inspections. And if you're a migrant worker who's being exploited by your boss, you are more likely to be targeted by immigration enforcement than they are to actually have consequences. So that also impacts, rates of exploitation throughout the entire labour market. And finally, for workers and actually for all immigrants, we need to have faster routes to settlement, because again, as I said before, that is the best way. If you have a secure status in this country, that is the best way to improve your status as a worker and to ensure that you can bargain for fair conditions on an equal playing field. And then I think we need to look at community cohesion. We need to look at how our communities have been driven apart by a racist narrative. So the first thing is obviously that the government needs to adopt a more positive framing for how they talk about immigration, and they need to reject the really shameful and disgusting way that they've fallen into the gutter of reform speak, and this false racist negative framing of immigration that they've capitulated to. But also we need to look at how kids who are born in the UK are not automatically British. That just should be changed. Most people in the UK assume that if you were born here and you've only ever lived here and this is your only home, that you're automatically entitled to British citizenship, but you're not. And that would be a really strong statement to turn that around against the racist narrative that is growing at the moment, that is not just immigrants themselves who are never able to be truly British, that is even their kids, right? We're talking about with the sons and daughters of immigrants who have lived their entire lives in the UK being presented by the right as foreigners. And that's really, really toxic and disgusting and bad for our communities. And it would make a really strong statement to give the automatic right to citizenship to people who've born here and never lived anywhere else. And then also we need to remove other barriers to integration specifically for kids and families. So there are unnecessary and counterproductive limits on what state support you can receive as a child in this country if your parents are immigrants. And that, you know, that analysis has shown that the government cannot reach its pledges to end child poverty, even now that it has been forced to scrap the two-child benefit cap, and thank God, they still will not be reaching the children of immigrants with the support that they need if they're living in poverty, because they are excluded on the basis of the status of their parents. So in order to end child poverty and help integration, we also need to break down those barriers. And I'm sorry, I know I went on for a while there, but there are so many important things that we can change that would be good for our whole society, not just for immigrants, but it would be good for immigrants, but it would be good for us too. And it would be good for the economy of the country as a whole as well. So this is it's such a no-brainer, and we really need to change course.
So that was researcher and commentator Zoe Gardiner, who is always welcome on the show. But Andy, now immigration has drastically and dramatically reduced. Do you expect the British public to soften their stance and, I don't know, become less interested in immigration?
So I think for most working class people, middle class people, people who, you know, work hard, you know, they're not political, I don't think it was ever about big numbers on a spreadsheet coming in or out. It was about feeling like life was getting harder and that the government weren't doing anything about it. And you had this kind of messianic figure like Farage who was going, they're coming over on the boats, taking your benefits, your jobs, etc., etc. It was just an excuse and this kind of false ploy to blame everything that's wrong in this country on migrants, legal and illegal. And I don't think that will necessarily change now. I mean, it's clear that Reform are just using it as a political football more than anything. You know, they spent the last 2 years talking about, oh, they're coming in, and now they're changing it to, oh, they're going out. I just think that's a bit silly. I think it's just, the reality is that when people's short-term visas expire, they leave the country. That's just how it works. It's not an exodus of young British people who are ambitious and want to take those ambitions elsewhere. They've just finished on their visas. I think the key lesson for me here is that if politicians, the Labour government at the moment, whatever government comes next, if they don't sort the basic issues in our society, wealth inequality, wage stagnation, broken public services, you know, the basic stuff like pints going up, you know, your meal deals rising by 10 pence every single time. If we don't fix those issues that normal people feel every single day, then someone like Farage, it might not be Farage in 10 years, it could be Jeremy, it could be someone else, is always going to find another angle to blame migrants and to blame the other for our society's issues. And I just think it is down to our elected politicians, both at the national government and the local government, to step in and start taking it seriously to stop that.
Well, it seems like they're already moving on to that anyway, or moving back to it, right? I've specifically noticed that the talk of immigration has gone down, not just because the numbers of legal immigrants has gone down, but because there's been very few boat crossings, because we're getting, obviously it's winter now, there's always fewer in winter, the numbers have come down. So I've noticed a complete hyper focus on benefits, welfare, people buying fancy Mercedes, which is half the truth that the media is giving these stories on. We're immediately seeing after the budget, multiple stories about benefits. Mum of three now gets an extra 20 grand a year because they lifted the cap, and you get all these stories. It very much reminds me of that kind of like 2005, 2010 kind of era where it was just all about at the end of the Labour Party those last few years, blaming everything pretty much on people on welfare, except the pensioners who make up the biggest proportion of that welfare budget. It's all about the single parents, the scummy working class people who are having too many kids who can't afford them. And it seems if you look at all the highlights from the budget, they're just already going back to that. They're prepping us that this is going to be the next fight after immigration. Do you kind of maybe agree with that, or do you think I'm getting it a bit wrong?
I think I actually wrote a Substack about this because I was on the awful GB News. But if GB News are asking, they're not awful. Please keep paying me money. But I was on GB News and we were debating about the two-child benefit cap had been leaked, that it was getting abolished in the budget. And we had this right-wing guy on, I won't say his name, but he was shouting about how there's no such thing as poverty in the country. But then when we were reading the front page of the Express that day, it was complaining about pensioners who were freezing to death. And that's why we need to secure the triple lock, etc., etc. And I was looking at that and I was thinking, so you're happy with single mothers and their kids starving, struggling, not being lifted out of poverty, but pensioners who are in the exact same position, they need to be looked after, they need to be protected. I just think this kind of paradox of single mothers bad, pensioners good, this kind of rose-tinted ideal of kind of the nostalgia of the generation that really worked hard, tried their best. I just think it's so silly, and it's such an easy political scapegoat because people are emotional. Obviously, people get angry if they feel like they're working hard and they're having a shit deal. I don't know, they're having a bad deal, and they have someone sitting on the bottom and not doing anything, and they're getting everything they wanted. So people are easily riled up by that. I just think it's so silly because we need to raise everybody up to a basic standard of living when energy companies are earning millions and millions and millions of profit, train companies are earning millions and millions of profit, and yet we're sat here complaining about whether a pensioner or whether a single mother should get 200 extra a month. I just think it's such a farcical debate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it will continue to be so. You can, go all the way back to even Marx writing. I'm sure any right winger who might be watching this will be like, "Ha, Marxist!" From like in the 19th century, he talked about how like the establishment were blaming the Irish and everything, like the Irish immigrants who were coming over. They've always found somebody to blame. There always has to be somebody. You can go back to the. What was that, sorry?
That's something that really strikes me, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. When they talk about migrants coming now, they go, "Oh, they're coming from third world countries, blah, blah, blah." But they're not like the Eastern Europeans that came here in the 2010s. They've integrated well. But if we think back to the 2010s, they were going, all these Eastern Europeans, they come in here with their cultures. They're not like the Irish. But then when we go back to when the Irish came over, these Irish, they're coming here with their cultures, not going to integrate. They're not like the Jewish migrants. And then when we go to the Jewish, do you know what I mean? Throughout history, the migrant class of the day have always been kind of the football that's been kicked about. And I just think, are we stuck in this kind of perpetual kind of anti-immigrant mindset? It's just so confusing.
This happened as well towards the end of the 1930s. There was two stories in the Daily Mail where they referred to like Jewish refugees coming to the UK. I think it was like 70, 80,000 over the space of a few years. And they were fleeing persecution, obviously, at that point. There weren't camps open at that point, right? This is just persecution. The idea of like something could happen, or their life could be in danger in the future. What a lot of refugees flee for. They referred to them as like so-called, like it was in like so-called people fleeing persecution. And then there was another one that they wrote where it was like, is it a coincidence that since the Jews have come here, the crime has started to rise in these certain areas? And it's just like you see the same stories and the same patterns decade after decade, and it's like, and we will never learn from it because they will always have to find somebody to scapegoat. Even though the story is about immigration, it's almost like not about immigration, right? It's about the idea of there has to be a divide. They have to put it there because once we're, it's very cliche, but once we're not divided and we're united in an ideal world, the only way we can unite is by, taking on, the elites in the establishment, the people who have the money, the people who have the wealth and the resources, the people who, the shareholders of the train companies that we all want to get back and the water companies, all of these people, right? They have the money and the resources that we need to fix all of our problems. And they don't want that, which is why, you're seeing the attacks on welfare being renewed. And you even see seeing new attacks on minimum wage, right? Farage has even gone after this, which surprised me. I didn't think he would. They're trying to blame, and this is again the top down, right? Instead of when we're talking about how middle class salaries are basically stagnating and the minimum wage is catching up to it, instead of thinking, oh, so the person up the ladder, right, I'm not going to look at them, I'm going to look down at the ladder, the person who isn't stopping me from getting up the ladder, and we're going to say, you know what, maybe we should pause minimum wage because these people are getting closer to my salary, as opposed to looking at the people above them. And I'm sure, I don't think the minimum wage fight is going to be over. I think that's going to be exacerbated more in the future.
The thing
Go ahead,
catches
sorry.
me off about minimum wage is that there are people are opposed to there being the removal of the age banding on minimum wage. In my mind, minimum wage labour is minimum wage labour. If you're hiring someone who's 20 and you want them because they've got a couple of years of experience over someone who's 18 or 16, why are you paying them minimum wage? And this argument just never seems to get brought up almost. Like, I think the idea of there being a different minimum wage for 14 to 16, 16 to 18, 18 to 20 is absolutely insane. And, we're such a wealthy country, we're such a developed country. How have we got to a stage where people are still being paid £5.60 for an hour's work? It is absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, it's hopefully we will, get there one day. We will see through the lies. Support independent media, support independent writers and journalists. Right, I am actually going to very quickly whiz through story 3. I'm not going to do the full thing, so dear producer, don't put any of the graphics up. I'm just going to quickly explain it, and then we're going to come straight back to Andy, because I do want to do this story, and then we'll go straight to the comments, because we've spent a lot of time on the other story. So, long story short, guys, apparently Nigel Farage just told his donors that he expects to make a deal with the Tories for the next election. Basically, the idea is that he knows, and his donors know, that there is no pathway to power for either of the parties to, get a majority in any way, shape, or form under our current electoral system. So Farage has apparently been telling his donors that he expects to make some sort of deal with them where it'll be on his terms and his conditions. And that's the way to the pathway to power, to number 10 at the next election. Now, both of them have denied it. Like Kemi said, yep, this isn't happening. The Tory spokesperson has said this isn't happening. Farage has said this isn't happening. And that's basically the very long story short. We'll skip the graphics on that one today. Andy, I know you've obviously probably seen this story that's been circulating since the FT first posted about it yesterday. They spoke to 2 different donors over the last few months about the story, so it does seem pretty legit, and I believe it, because there is no pathway to power, right, under our current system. We've got 2 right-wing parties. You've got the Liberal Democrats nipping away as still obviously at Tory voters. They were quite successful at that at the last election. You've got Farage kind of getting voters from lots of different places, but no one can get into power. So they both deny that this is going to happen, but do you think it's basically inevitable anyway?
I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. I mean, even this week's announcements, 3 Tory MPs have defected to Reform, Jonathan Gullis being the headline. Finally, it seems that he's got a job, which is good news for him and HMRC, I'm sure.
I forgot about that story.
But 21 former Tory MPs have defected over to Reform in the last year. Danny Kruger, the only sitting MP that's defected this Parliament. You can see a lot of the donors have gone to Reform, a lot of the staff, a lot of the council, a lot of that kind of physical infrastructure that we don't often think about as activists have actually gone across to Reform already. And you could see, a realistic world where they do kind of cross that Rubicon, if you will. And I think the really interesting part of the story was Robert Jenrick vehemently denied that he was going to come over. People said that he was going to come over and he could be their shadow chancellor. But to be honest, if I was Robert Jenrick, that's exactly what I'd do. There's no real future in the Conservative Party as it looks. Obviously, 4 years is a long time until the election. But if you can go and be, the real successor to Farage, because there isn't one spiritually, physically. Richard Tice is too old. Lee Anderson is whatever Lee's doing. Sarah Pochin, Zia Youssef doesn't play well with the membership base. There is no real heir to Farage. So if you're Rob Jenrick, he's 42, 43, a young man still in the game of politics, you would be kind of hedging your bets and going, if I might lose my nice shadow justice brief, might lose a bit of respect amongst colleagues for 3 years. But if it plays off, if they continue to be hitting those 33, 34, 35 in the polls for the next couple of years, that bet would massively pay off for the next 20 years of his career.
It's interesting because it almost seems like inevitable, like something has to happen, right? Let's just say that, he said as part of his quotes, and he said it multiple times, the Tory party is basically over, right? Like, if that was true, not all of those voters will go to Reform. They'll go to other places, or they might just not vote, right? But then you've also got, let's just say they did some sort of merger, right? As speculated. They don't have, oh, have we lost Andy for a second? Oh, he's back. I saw you go black for a second. They don't have proper democratic function within the Reform Party still, after promising that they would. Farage famously, obviously, has been ousted from multiple parties. He's lost parties. He's lost control of his parties because of democratic power and the way they've previously been set up, which is probably why he's been so hesitant to do it in this party. And if I remember correctly, it was actually part of the reason why Rupert Lowe actually left and had this big dispute, or got kicked out technically. But he was saying there's just no structures in place. There's nothing set up. It's just like this. I think he literally called him an authoritarian kind of leader. He said something along those lines, right? Because how can you have a merger when he'd obviously be scared that he would then just maybe be ousted, because he'd have to put in some sort of structure, right? The Tory party are not just going to hand themselves over to a guy that they can't, maybe get rid of in any way. And then obviously both sides would lose voters in different ways. And we just don't know. We've seen so many polls. Have you ever seen so many polls in your entire career constantly? Because they make headlines, they make the companies money. And I genuinely don't trust any of them. And I'm not trying to talk down any of these people's jobs in any way, but when you look at the last election data and when you look at where polling is now and how things have moved, I don't think any pollster can even predict, when you see, oh, this is how many seats Reform would have if there was an election right now. I don't think anybody in any shape or form can anywhere near predict that, because you can never account for how people are going to tactical vote. You can't account for the fact that there are multiple seats where it was like Labour won at 12,000, the Tories got 11,000, and then Reform got 10,000. Like, I don't think any polling can narrow down those seats any further. My question is, I'll sharpen it. Like, what do you think is the likely situation of what could happen with this? Do you think that it's more likely there will be some sort of merger, or is the Tory party over?
Well, I think, we look back to 2019 with Boris Johnson's massive victory. No one would have ever thought 5 years on from that anyone but the Tories would have been in power for a generation. Certainly not at the next elections. 5 years is a long time in politics. It's a long time in life as well, I suppose. But I think a great kind of point to look at when we talk about tactical voting is that Caerphilly by-election that just happened in the Senate. You did see that in a Labour heartland seat. Labour have only ever had that seat. The complete collapse of the Labour vote to keep Reform out. And I think that is, if things keep going as they are in 4 years' time, I think that is what we'll see on a mass scale across the country, not necessarily against Labour or to an alternative, but sometimes in favour of Labour. And I think you will have, Gordon Brown's wet dream of a kind of progressive alliance, some kind of government of all the talents of the Greens, of the Lib Dems, of, smaller independents, your party maybe, with Labour to keep Reform out. Because I am at a loss at what we would genuinely do if Reform got in. Do you know, like, they're absolutely nuts. They keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think at some point the left do have to have a serious conversation about tactical voting.
I'm going to come to the comments in just a second, but I remember when I was doing research for today's show, I swear, either on a podcast or somewhere in the news over the last few weeks, I heard somebody say that apparently Labour Party are actually looking into changing the voting system in terms of, like, I think what they said, whoever it was that they'll change it to some sort of like ranked choice voting type system, but still keep like first past the post. And I tried to look up where that was said, because I definitely heard it somewhere recently, and I just don't know where. Not just some random person on social media. I heard it somewhere, and I couldn't find any source for it. But I don't know. Can you imagine them just quickly trying to change the system before the next election? Or do you think it's seen too much as a way to keep them out of power?
So it's technically Labour Party policy to make a transition into proportional representation. That was voted for by the members at, I think, the 2023 conference. So technically,
never accepted it, though, did he? I don't think.
Yeah, so there is clear hunger for it in the membership and in the wider Labour movement. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came to some kind of power broking almost of the unions and the membership deciding their support for the next leader of the Labour Party, whether PR is actually quite important. bargaining tool, allowing a proper referendum on PR or implementing PR in some function. I could actually see that being used in the kind of factional negotiations of the Labour Party leadership election.
I feel like the only way to really get it through, though, would be to shift the blame off themselves of trying to rig the system, quote unquote, rig the system, because that's how it'll be obviously framed. If they, send it to a referendum, because then Nigel Farage can't argue against it then, right? If it's the will of the people. But that's just me completely just speculating about the future. Right, we will have to come on to the comments because we ran super over, because the stories today were amazing, but they were long and they were in depth. So let's move on to our comment section with our lovely producer. Hello, how's it going today?
Hey, I am not doing too badly. Lovely to see you both. I feel like I haven't
That's
been
Ben,
on a
by the
show
way.
with you for a while, Lewis, and of course Andy. Absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen Andy's GB News appearances, you need to see them. Andy takes these people to task, man. It is so good to see. Like honestly, absolutely incredible.
You're
Yes.
too kind. Too kind.
Let's get to the comments. It's only the truth, honestly. Anybody can verify that by just checking out your social media. Right. So, Moebius kindly gifted a 1 turn left membership. Thank you very much, Moebius. We appreciate you. We see you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Adrena gifted 5 turn left memberships. Thank you very much, Adrena. Absolutely fantastic. Can see some great names in there as well. You chose well. I'll do the giftings, the gifted memberships first. Specs Bean Farmer gifted 5 turn left memberships again. Absolutely love you, Specs.
Thank you so
Brilliant
much,
to see you again.
Specs. Specs is always here.
Yes, yeah, they're one of our regulars. So it's always fantastic. And our first comment is part of a donation as well. Dr. Bowater, I hope that's how do you pronounce that? Dr. Bowater says, do you think donated $9.99? First of all, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And also said, do you think your party will be ready to fight an election in 4 years' time? And given how hostile some members are to the Greens, do you think they'll agree to a Your Party Green alliance? What do we think, guys? Lewis, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Jeremy was caught in a clip just the other day. I can't remember who it was with, basically saying like, I've worked with these people, I'll work with them again, but they're not a proper socialist party. I feel like despite the perceived leftist infighting that constantly apparently goes on and has been going on forever, I feel like they are capable of putting aside any differences, because the differences aren't that big. The differences only exist in this idea of like both of these two parties suddenly having this growth. Obviously, the Greens have been around for a while, but they've had this massive growth under Zach, right? And obviously, I don't want to take away from any previous Green party leadership's growth, because the Greens have been growing like double year on year in terms of votes. So that's like 2 elections, I think, at least. So well done to those. And Zach's really brought it forward. And obviously, your party has had its own success. Their only differences kind of lie in this. They're all trying to sweep up these, disillusioned former kind of like Labour voters, or hesitant or reluctant former Labour voters, right? So I think that's really the only kind of like hostility they might have towards each other in any way. And I don't think Zach's been hostile at all in any way, even when he's been asked about, Zara and Corbyn's, comments and stuff like this here and there. What do you think, Andy?
I think, 4 years is obviously a long time. I think the real question for me is next year's local elections in May. We know that parties like the Green Party, like your party, they're activist-led, they're local-led. I think it'll be really interesting to see how they come together for that May election, because a council election can be decided by 200 people. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of average ward size. So I think it will be really, really interesting to see if there are informal local agreements. Obviously, your party and the Green Party are reasonably decentralised parties, so you might see local relationships taking prominence over those relationships of Corbyn and Zara and Zach. So I think that would be really interesting to see, actually.
Yeah, it seems like I feel like even besides Zach and his recent success, I feel like Green is a brand and your party is Zara and Jeremy. That's how people perceive it generally, right? So when it comes to election days, whether it's local or national, I think people are willing to just vote Green, whoever the candidate is. Whereas obviously it's still a new party, but your party doesn't have that kind of, they don't have that res yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the locals and see how many people they run in different places and any locals that come after that, leading up to the big old national election, general election in potentially 2029, in theory.
I do think that I do think that these two questions are tied together. Whether or not your party are ready to fight an election properly in 4 years' time, probably does depend on whether they're willing to do an alliance with the Greens, and whether they're in a position to be able to do an alliance with the Greens, because of course it'll indicate a couple of things. Most importantly, it'll indicate that their focus has turned away from the sort of inward-looking stuff, which is necessary to do at the beginning of a party. You know, it's not an attack necessarily, but at the beginning, obviously, what we're hoping is that we will be able to see a Green Party which is focused more on attacking reform, attacking the Conservatives, attacking the right wing of the Labour Party, the things that we want to see from our left, right, and driving the political conversation leftwards as well. I think that is something that we do want to see, but I think that those two questions are like fundamentally linked, right? I should go on with the comments. Sorry, I get distracted rambling about what.
Good question, though.
Your party.
Great question.
Yes.
Great question.
Yeah, really good question. Leo started the comments and said it's nice to see how patient the Turn Left chat are compared to Navarra's chat when they're 5 minutes late to start. Yes, our chat are used to us, and we do love you for it. We love you for your patience. And
Thank you.
Scottish
People-
Shoal said,
People
Oh, yeah,
know
sorry, go
it's usually me that ends up making everybody late.
It's all good. It's all good. It was pretty good this time. Everybody was sort of like, yeah, we ran 5 minutes over, but that's because there was complications. It was all good. Scottish Shoal said in regards to the Your Party stuff, it's like watching mum and dad fighting. Genuinely don't know what side to go on. Think I'll stick with Uncle Zach, lol. And I think that's where a lot of people are.
I saw an immensely funny comment on this. It might have been the same person. Was, well, Uncle Zach will take us to the panto, so I'll stick with him over Christmas.
Yes.
I still need to watch. I've heard some commentary on the Rest is Politics interview with Zach. I still haven't listened to it yet. But again, this is just personally my own comment section on TikTok from my followers. But every time I mention Corbyn, Zara, Your Party, anything, I just get flooded. It's almost like reform style bots, but for the Green Party. I'm not accusing them of actually having bots, but it's that amount. Like even my last video that I did, I think it was yesterday on it or the day before. Like almost like every comment is just like, just vote Green. Like I've switched to the Greens. It's green. And that's really interesting coming from like my audience and me knowing them. But yeah, it is really interesting. A lot of people are just like, I don't think everyone's going to Zach because they absolutely love him necessarily, but I think a lot of people are just saying he is a safe left-leaning vote who seems consistent, seems like a nice guy, and isn't really like shit talking anybody besides maybe like the current party in government or causing any sort of drama or anything like that. So I think a lot of people just see him as a nice, safe left-leaning vote as well. People want stability, right? They don't want drama. People love drama, but people don't want it.
And also, I think it's like Corbyn in 2015. You've got someone who seems really dynamic, really active, really personable, and you don't get that very much. It happened 10 years ago with Corbyn. So you get these kind of once every decade kind of politicians that come along on the left and kind of really energize. And I think that is really good for activists to have someone who isn't boring and stiff and someone that you can actually imagine meeting and actually getting on with.
Like most of the Labour cabinet.
Well, quite.
I'm just saying that's my opinion. I feel like they're very stiff, a lot of them. I was listening to David Lammy's interview in the Newsagents today, and it was just terrible. It was just so boring and stiff. But anyway, let's move on. Let's move on from
that. Edward Sexby said, to be fair, I agree that you can't be a member of two political parties at the same time, rather than groups or community organisations. Just don't agree with the top-down expulsions. I think the expulsions are an interesting point to sort of like talk about. But to be honest, to me at least, I'm more interested in the kind of fundamentals. And the fundamentals were kind of highlighted by this comment from C Here, who said, I want to know where your party stands on trans rights in Ukraine. There was a vote on trans rights, right? And basically, it was split into thirds. 2/3 voted, but basically for the trans rights bill, and 1/3 voted against. And a lot of trans people I knew were retweeting that and going, oh, so only 1/3 of them don't want us to have rights. That's not good. where are we on trans rights and your party, and Ukraine and your party? Have we got any thoughts on this? Andy, I'll start with you this time, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, as a Labour Party member, don't throw stones in glass houses. I think the Labour Party's position on trans rights, particularly in government, is not the right one to have. So I think it's worth condemning that. I speak from a position of slight hypocrisy because I'm a member of a party that's been pretty poor on trans rights the last couple of years. But I think there is that huge division in the membership between those who are kind of more socially conservative and those who are more socially progressive, and I think that is a real hard thing to balance. And your party's a new party; they've got to find themselves and find out where they stand and where their membership stands. I mean, I'm not surprised that there's a 2/3, 1/3 split, but it's a new party. They need to find out where they stand on things, and like anything new, they're going to go through a feeling of discovery almost.
Yeah, and it's the members as well, right? These are people who've signed up to the party. They're not like vetted people, right? I think it's more important to focus on what is it the obviously policy and manifesto is and what the leadership thinks. I feel like there are always going to be pretty much people in every single party who might be either not the best trans ally or might be slightly anti-LGBTQ in certain aspects, or there might be some people who just have other opinions on other things. I think it's about what is the policy, who is the leadership, because there are always going to be members of any party who don't necessarily completely align with you. And I feel like if a party is maybe too much on the side of just certain types of policies, then you can question whether you want to be a part of it or not. But I personally wouldn't pay attention to the minority of voters who might be voting against this in any party in particular, really. I focus on the policy, the leadership, and the people at the top, and what positions people are put in and what power that they have.
Can I just respond to a couple of comments there about why I'm still a member of the Labour Party and why you'd be a Labour Party member in 2025? I think if anyone hasn't, I think you should read John McDonnell's opinion piece in Tribune magazine that he wrote a couple of weeks ago about why he believes it's so important that the left remains in the Labour Party to kind of create it to be that kind of home for democratic socialism in an institution. And I think if you read that and still disagree with me, that's totally fair. But I view the Labour Party as the mode of travel for democratic socialism in the UK. You can have a go at me in the comments, but I think read that John McDonnell piece. I'm an affiliated union member, so yeah, read that and then please feel free to tweet me.
I don't unfortunately have any information on Ukraine, so I can't give an opinion on it. I know Jeremy's personal opinions. We all know how anti-NATO Zara is, but it's a complex issue. I don't have any information on how they voted about that. I also do have to mention, as a Callum, Turn Left contributor, has mentioned in the background, that regarding any expulsions and chaos and drama around that, we did actually approach Kerry Murphy for comment, had the opportunity to provide information and a statement, and we didn't get one. So we just want to put that out there, as I've been reminded to say. But maybe we can look into Ukraine and see if anything got specifically mentioned and voted on then, because I didn't see anything about it personally. Do we have another question? We can probably do one more because we're running really over. That's my fault.
No, it's all right. So I think. In which case, sorry, I've got about 5.
Okay, we can maybe do two more. We can maybe do. Andy, are you okay for a few more minutes?
Of course.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've got a few comments. Apologies. Okay, let's leave the your party stuff now. And we'll go on to the other story. I wanted your guys' response to this actually, because when we were talking about emigration, Mick said draining poor countries of workers to benefit our own economy is not progressive. I had my own little response. What you guys think of your response? I had my own little response, which was a couple of things. First of all, we are a poor country now. We are not doing well economically in terms of our living standards compared to other countries. Other countries, and this is the second part of my response, like Poland, who of course there was a whole thing about Poland is sending their best people here, so there's going to be a brain drain on Poland. I just don't think this is how immigration works. I don't think that immigration works as in all of the best minds will leave and go elsewhere. People's reasons for immigrating or emigrating are usually quite personal and to do with family connections as much as anything else, job prospects, all of that sort of thing. But yes, I will hand it back. I'll go to Lewis first. If that's okay.
Yeah, I don't want to assume, but I'm actually going to guess that maybe Mick is specifically talking potentially about health workers, because this is a really common topic about when it comes to health workers. Because I don't think, like India is one of the, I think it's got like the most people with PhDs in the entire world. I don't think Indian people coming to the UK with PhDs is necessarily probably having a negative impact on their economy. But us taking healthcare workers away from actual poor countries is having an effect. This has been studied. There is data on this. There is information on this. I don't know it off the top of my heart, but there is a global shortage in healthcare professionals, and the richer countries are basically mopping them up, and it is causing problems in those countries. I can't remember which country it was recently, but I saw a mini documentary on like these nurses in one of the African countries who were like all protesting because their government is so poor that they haven't been paid in like 8 months or something like that. There's a global shortage of these workers of countries that are already really poor. There are some pools of workers which are absolutely fine to trade around the world and incentivized to come to different places, but there are very specific industries like healthcare where there's a global shortage, and it is having a very negative impact on some countries. Anything on that, Andy?
I think I mean, I come from a trade union background. The way that I look at it is that the struggles of the migrant worker are the exact same as that of the English or the British or the Scottish worker. You can see that by, we don't have this industrial working class anymore where everyone in one town goes and works at a pit or at steelworks or whatever. We have such a diverse working class of Uber drivers, of warehouse workers, of Deliveroo cyclists. Obviously, other delivery services are available. Warehouse workers, Tesco workers. I think when we get down to, we need to question the ethics of having migrant workers, I don't think that's the decision or conversation that we need to be having. We need to be talking about depressed wages. We need to be talking about lack of access to training. We need to be talking about the fact that the post-Blair education choices destroy vocational apprenticeships. And this government actually are reforming the apprenticeship levy, building those gold standard apprenticeships back so then we can train British workers. But I don't think the conversation is about, is it ethical to bring migrant workers here? They're here. That's the reality of the situation. And we need to ensure that those people, as a member of the working class, are protected from corporate exploitation, is my view.
No, you're probably right, though. I think it's right to say like this is a problem. It's had a problem, but you can't really even make a good argument about it, right? And do anything about it. Like if a country needs a specific type of worker, they're gonna go and get them. Like creating a policy about the ethics of it's just not an argument you can probably really ever win, to be honest. And it is maybe somewhat fruitless, despite the fact that we do know it is having an effect. But yeah, no, it's interesting. We do need to obviously. I don't see why we're streeting, and I'm sure it's very complicated. And I'm just saying this out of my arse, but why are we not increasing the caps on like how many doctors can be trained per year? I'm sure it's very complicated. It probably requires a lot of resources, but I'm just frustrated. Like, yeah, they've thrown money at it. They've done this with appointments and all of this type of stuff. But when I've got GPs, multiple GPs, some I'm friends with on TikTok who are posting saying, I can't find a job. And you've got like, junior doctors who are now called residents. What's the new name for them?
Resident doctors.
Resident doctors. Who are like, I'm ready to be, to specialize in something. Oh wait, there's 5,000 people applying for this one. That's exaggeration. There's 1,000 people applying for this one place, and there's like 1 or 2 people that they're taking on, right? Like, why is that still happening? It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
That's a key point of the strike that they've just announced. 5 days more action over. I was on the PMA picket line a couple of weeks ago for their first round of strikes, and a lot of it is about those, not even the initial resident junior doctor training places, it's those specialist places afterwards, because people are finishing their resident doctor contracts and then they get to the point where they want to specialize and there are no jobs. And I think I'll just take this moment to plug, I think everyone who can, go out and support your BMA picket. Donate to the strike fund if you've got a bit of cash, go in, or just go down and show your support, because I know it will mean the absolute world to those doctors to show that the public are behind them, and the right-wing rhetoric about them being lazy is not the case, and that's not how British people feel.
Yeah, and it's a combination of like the media demonizing young people, especially they're still called, like, even on the newsagents yesterday, they interviewed a guy from like some sort of like a Resident Doctors Alliance thing. I can't remember his name. I apologize. He was a good speaker, but these people, they're still referred to as junior doctors. It's quite a new name change, and it's almost like attacking the youth, attacking them as lazy. It's attacking doctors. They just want more money. They're greedy. It's the same old lines over and over again from the media given out. And in the meantime, I think 2 doctors I follow have recently just gone to Australia on social media, and it's just kind of like, they're leaving, guys. Like, we need to give them more of what they want. But yeah, do we have another question?
Just a couple of things. So just we're going to just talk briefly about the Reform Tory merge.
Oh, yeah.
But also Leo said this, and I thought it was quite prescient. I don't know if you know, but I know several people from Kent who haven't had water for about like three or 4 days.
Yes.
Yep, because Southeast Water have, I think it's Southeast Water, have screwed up so badly. And Leo rightly pointed out, can we all take a moment to pay our respects for the people of Kent? Not only is their water out, but they're also a reform-run council, which is, yep, things could not be much worse for them at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, but I won't go to you guys for comment on that, because I just want to talk about the Reform Tory merger. Couple of comments. I'll get you to respond to them both at the same time.
Sure.
So, honestly, this is Who's That 93. Honestly, I think Reform/Tory merge could be a good thing. It should catalyse the left to get their shit together. So bear that in mind. Could it catalyse the left to get their shit together? And Michael turned to left, said, how can Reform form an alliance with the Tories when they're so clearly anti-establishment?
Well, I think that is I think that is one of the real issues, because a Reform are 32, 33, 34, depending on your given pollster, and a lot of those voters have come from non-voting previously, because they have the impression that Reform are an anti-establishment, they are an outsider party, outsider group of people. And I do think that if they were to merge with the Tories, or even have a 2019 style Brexit party conservative alliance over where they're going to stand, I think a lot of that non-voter voter base would collapse, and that support would collapse. But it probably would be supplemented by the conservative base that they take from it. So I think it's a much of a muchness, to be honest.
Yeah, like there's, I don't know exactly the exact politics of what happened in France a couple of years ago, when basically, it wasn't just the left, it was just like everybody united to make sure that Marine Le Pen's party, that national, I can't even say it, that like national, what's it called again? What is it? The National Frontelas? I'm not even going to try and say the French words, but yeah, Marine Le Pen's party, right? They all literally like teamed up, like everybody teamed up. Germany has this clause of, basically there's an official clause of all the parties teaming up to make sure like a far-right party can't get in. And Reform's not as bad as AfD, but I hate to be like who's the worst and least of the far-right parties in Europe. I would hope that people could put their differences in the side in the future if there is some sort of merger, or they team up in some way or another, that between the Green Party, maybe the Liberal Democrats, Labour, and whoever else, even the SNP perhaps, can work together to make sure that the election is done as tactically as possible. I know people hate this, but we are attached to this system. When I say tactically, I mean, specifically people sit, not standing in certain seats, and that comes with so many complications. Like with the Green Party, it's the members who have voted to run a candidate in every single seat. It's not something Zach can just click his fingers and do. But I hope that if the threat is imminent, it looks like they could win, that whatever it is that people have to do, we do to make sure that they don't come into power. Yeah. But we'll see. We will see.
Yes. I think there is a chance that it could galvanise the left, but the left are quite good at splitting amongst themselves, let's be honest as well. Yes, we are quite good at that. But I will leave you at this point and hand back over to you two. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much. Good questions. And Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful. It's been great. Your insights have been amazing. Can people follow you anywhere specific? Where are you most active on?
Yeah, shoot me a follow on Twitter. I'm at Andy12s, or on Blue Sky, I'm 12s.bsky.social. And then on TikTok, I'm just at Andy12s. So yeah, shoot us a follow.
Lovely. Thank you. Hope to have you back again. Now, that was a great show. Went on for a little while. I am a little bit rusty. I haven't actually done this in like 2 months-ish. So thank you for everybody's patience today. But we will have our next show on Friday. Clear my throat. I will have our next show on Friday, so thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully everybody who is here will be back on Friday to watch our next and amazing show. Please obviously consider supporting us at turnleftmedia.co.uk /support. You can obviously become a YouTube member for 99 pence, and just if you want to just leave extra comments, make sure you like the videos, just listen to us in the background, leave us on, and just engage with us as much as you want. Your comments are appreciated more than anything. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I will see you next time.